Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namasami. Thank you for the clock. I was looking around for that thing. There were no clocks at the time of the Buddha. They had not invented the hour yet. And that's quite actually something helpful to know when you meditate and so forth, that extreme time consciousness is a feature of modernity from another culture. I think the Phoenicians invented the hour. At the time of the Buddha, there were just morning, middle of the day, afternoon, the evening, maybe more human. So I'm back again. The last time I was here, had an opportunity to talk and to experience the building, and it was in its penultimate stage. It was closing in. The landscaping had not been finished, but I've been watching this process for about 22 years, I guess it is. We actually, in British Columbia, where I started 24 years ago, there were no other branch monasteries, but there were initial invitations to in the San Francisco area to monks. And so I landed in in British Columbia, and we started in what's called the Shack Monastery. And so I really appreciate this place, having started in a broken down shack on the side of a river. And I've been watching the progress all the way along for the last 20 years or so, starting back at the little house and the garage there and the one washroom for the whole community. I thought it was quite a luxury, actually, to have a flush toilet. We had an outhouse, like a hole in the ground, but it was embarrassing. Actually, I have a few Thais that actually came for 23 years ago, showed up at the Shack Monastery, so they're actually here, and they remember that. They donated a tarp so that they would have privacy in using the hole in the ground. Yeah, good old tarps. So it's come a long ways, and it's really good that we did start this way in a very with no resources. We just arrived on the seat of our robes, the monk's wings, the bowl and robes, and that's literally, I landed in Canada with just that. I didn't intend to stay. I had no intention at all. I'd finished my 5th reign, and it was an invitation to visit, so there was no plans. I mean, how can you make plans, really, when you have no resources? There's nothing, you can't command things. So it did happen by trust, etc. And I remember this, but being inspired to some degree by the Sangha in England who arrived there, and Ajahn Sumedho's doubts expressed to Ajahn Chah about how this would work in the West. And Ajahn Chah's reply was, "You mean there are no generous people there?" It cuts right through, doesn't it? Beautiful. And of course, it turned out to be generous people. And it is by the power of this generosity and a number of different, what we would call paramis, or cultivations of human virtue, that this arrives. It doesn't just appear by generosity. There are other elements. One of them particularly manifested by Ajahn Pasanno is endurance, patient endurance. And Ajahn is now been an abbot for 46 years? Yeah. And I've been in association with him for about 20 26 of those, or 27 of those, I showed up in Thailand after my second reign. And so, with great admiration for this particular characteristic of endurance and patient endurance, which I have found very inspiring, because it's not all upataks bringing you coffee and so forth. There's a lot more to it than that. Having watched Ajahn Pasanno have two kinds of malaria at the same time one year, I arrived in Thailand from West Virginia. I was ordained in the Bhavana Society in West Virginia, and the resonance, the perfume of Ajahn Chah's reputation had drifted all to North America, and I heard about this, and I went there because I had heard this high disciplined virtuous practice following the Vinaya and so forth, and I really wanted to experience it in a classical culture, and I'm so glad that I went there, because it might have been the end of, just at the tail end of almost a continuous practice, almost like the time of the Buddha, still persisting there. And it was such a beautiful thing to arrive there. And I arrived with a Vietnamese monk who was had been in the robes since he was 8 years old. He had to leave Vietnam with the boat people during the Vietnam War, and we had both heard of Ajahn Chah, and that there was an international forest monastery that we could possibly, and they were so gracious to accept our written, because in the court, there was just before computers and emails and stuff like, so we wrote letters by hand, and there was somebody there that presented that to Ajahn Pasanno, and he said, sure, bring it, let him come on. So that was the gracious hospitality of that. And we arrived. And in the early days before, at first you don't get you're not given your range. You're sort of observed for a while before you're accepted into the Sangha. And during that time, I had a chance to experience my first experience of the character of Ajahn Pasanno. We were the three. There was a Cambodian monk who had escaped the massacre in Cambodia, a Vietnamese monk, and myself, and we were shaving our heads and just finding our way around. And my maybe it was the Cambodian monk, or I can't remember which one it was, but half shaved head. And the Vietnamese monk said, Ajahn, who's this? And it was stark naked man approaching us. And it was weird, because maybe it was the tradition here, I don't know, to go naked. Who knows? We were very geographically challenged. We didn't know where we were, actually. We heard sounds, and the Vietnamese guy thought that possibly there was artillery in the distance as well. He wasn't sure how close we were to Cambodia and all this kind of stuff. So we had all kinds of mythological ideas. So we're not sure, as this naked man approached us, and then dropped and bowed to us, and spoke in Thai, of course, which none of us understood. So we thought, okay, shall we go and see Ajahn Pasanno? So we, the four of us, now it's an interesting line. One soap in one side of your hair, half shaved, the Vietnamese, the Cambodian, the Canadian, and the naked man. In a parade to the Ajahns Kuti. We hoped the Ajahn was there, so we called to the Ajahn. Ajahn Pasanno. Ajahn Pasanno. Ajahn Pasanno appeared on the upper deck, wrapped in blankets. This is a very hot time of the year. Wrapped in blankets and shaking and pale. in the midst of a malaria attack and peered over the side to these four, one naked, one half-shaved. And Ajahn, we have a guest, I think, here. And this is a vivid memory for me, very important memory. It's helped me so many times in being an abbot, because I've had even stranger things happen as an abbot. But Ajahn Pasanno looked over and spoke in this very calm voice. And then it eventually came down, and wrapped in blankets and shaking, now 5 of us proceeded in a parade to the main sala, where we went to the place where there was anagarika clothes and white clothes at the back, and Ajahn opened his closet, just like nothing was happening. He was just so together and calm in the midst of this attack. And he spoke. I didn't know what he was saying to this gentleman. Anyway, so eventually we got him clothed, and everything just worked out just fine. There was no sense of alarm or anything like this. It was so calmly done. And then Ajahn Pasanno got to go back to his malaria attack So I saw, and that malaria stuff happened, it was very mysterious, because it turned out it was 2 strains at the same time, and one would get cured, but the other one would be there, and so forth. And so I saw Ajahn in under all kinds of different circumstances, and I mean, really, this is where you see it in the details of life, and the endurance, the patience, and to meet all of the unexpected things. Now, you may think that a monastery is a very controlled place, but actually it's a karmic whirlpool. It attracts the most exalted and the spiritual, 3 types. The criminal, the insane, and the wise. And we all live nicely together. And this is the beauty of it. And I saw with the wise and good-hearted abbots, and of course, at one point, Ajahn Pasanno compassionately also went away for a period of time, and Ajahn Jayasaro, who's sitting right beside Ajahn Pasanno, was the abbot then. And I saw again this lovely equanimity and warm-heartedness, particular sense from Ajahn Jayasaro, where I got a sense of warm-heartedness and generosity, seeing this highly developed character. And that really helped when the 2 monks who sat beside me both became schizophrenic at the same time. And it was very, very, very interesting, and a great lesson in compassion and patience and generosity, how Ajahn Jayasaro handled this. Now that's if you know the statistics on schizophrenia, the chances of 2 monks who are ordained together getting schizophrenia together is astronomical. And that makes you believe in karma. There's just no other explanation how this could happen. Unless it was me, because I was just slightly senior to them, and I passed them the food. Maybe it was, I don't know what it was. We had also formed a Thai study group. None of us spoke Thai, and we decided that we would teach each other Thai. And the 3 of us had a small group meeting to learn Thai together. And so that also might have contributed to the situation. Anyway, this is the feature, of course, of the world. There is a vast portion of the population who have some level of mental affliction. Some are virtue challenged as well. And so monks should be prepared to be in the midst of this. They are just little grains of salt flavoring this dish, and we need to bring our sanity, our peace, our patience, our endurance, our generosity, our kindness, and also to learn about this, because it's only by experiencing these kind of things that you get to know how your practice is going. So in the midst of building buildings, which I will get to, by the way, all of this is going on in the background as well, and that is part of this, the building process along the way. And we're starting with very humble beginnings. This, the resultant here is exquisite. I find it, it's not going to take your breath away. It's not the Sistine Chapel. It's not Borobudur. It's not Angkor Wat. It's not going to take your breath away. But it's beautifully representative of really this gorgeously understated sanity and mental health that this tradition represents. This is a classical tradition. It's exquisitely disciplined, but the discipline is at the service of the production of beauty. And one of the things we recited in the chant this morning is that the Dhamma that the Buddha taught is beautiful in the beginning, beautiful in the middle, and beautiful in the end. So it's not that we are just testing ourselves to see how tough we are, and sometimes in the forest tradition it can be that way. There's I remember a little sort of saying about monks. In the first 5 years, monks talk about food. From 5 to 10, extreme austerities, and from 10 on, building projects. But I've got a new stage now. At 30, he's talking about the meaning of building projects. So it starts in retrospect, in the end, it starts to, you realize that it wasn't about 2x4s, it wasn't about design, it was a story, it was another story altogether that had meaning and beauty to it, and that these buildings are mere expressions, they are external expressions of something within. And of course, you can see quite impressive buildings out there. and you might wonder, what's the difference between an impressive building out there and one of these buildings? And the difference is that those buildings out there are just buildings quite often. They're just the external material aspect. And that, without an internal meaning, without meaning to it, and representation of what it is to be human, they are merely empty buildings. They are truly just material. But it's when these buildings are just a reflection of a rich and beautiful interior quality that they have meaning to them. And then I celebrate these things. They are poems. They are music to me. Before I was a monk, a long time ago, I was a musician. And then one of the things that monks can't do is music. Now, the circuits that used to do the music have now do buildings in me. So I transferred all those nerve endings and those synapses over to appreciation of spaces. And one of the things, a beautiful phrase in the history of architecture is that architecture is really frozen music. It's a beautiful image that music is something that happens in time, but you can freeze it and make it into space. And this is what these spaces are. And hopefully, it's not just music as an indulgence or architecture as an indulgence. It's an attempt, whatever degree we can, to suggest to the mind the inner life of the beautiful spaces that are possible within. And the real goal of our process and our practice is to create beautiful spaces within. This happens to be, and I was appreciating it last night because we took a little trip yesterday up onto the ridge to see the fire and so forth. And it was dusty and it was hot. I was getting sun on the side of my face and so forth. And to come down here in the evening and just sit and bask in the gorgeous sort of fresh and cool air, that the system that's being put in and the construction, the careful construction of this, because to not add any extra burdens to the experience of being a vulnerable human being. And to appreciate that, to feel that cool air is like a kiss. Very beautiful, and I'm thinking of all of the thought and processes and mechanics that go into this. But it is when I felt that air, and of course, one of the things I've been doing for the last, long before I was a monk, I was a serious meditator, or let's say serious, maybe sincere meditator. I've been working with the breath, and eventually what I realized is not the breath, it's the air. It's the air element. The breath meditation is really just the air element. It's just something you can carry around with you. And so as I was sitting in here and feeling this air, unfortunately I was able to change places with Ajahn Jayasaro and get the little cool air to cascade upon my head. That I felt so still, so full. My heart was full of appreciation, and especially sitting between these two esteemed monks and remembering our history. Our history together is much more vivid to me than it would be to them, because they were quite senior to me, and there's lots of monks that come through. But your remembrance of your teachers, so they were both, I've had three sort of formal teachers in my life. Bhante Gunaratana was my ordination teacher, and I spent a few years with him. I have great esteem. He's still alive at over 90. And saw the paramis manifested in him, different paramis. And then Ajahn Pasanno was the next, and Ajahn Jayasaro. And so they are large figures in my consciousness. They always will be. And it was beautiful to be sitting between them and feeling this cool air cascade, and also just the feeling of stillness and peace that came to me here. And that would not have been the case if I had not been given the opportunities by senior monastics to have a supported life and a cultivated life. So I was so appreciative of this. And this is the inner reflection. This is hopefully what these buildings will allow or support in some way. We shouldn't be dismissive of mere materiality. The Buddha was never in a fight with materiality. He just understood that it's a support for your internal architecture, the space and the coolness and the warmth, of course. And that when we reflect on our requisites, we are told to be grateful for the food, the clothing, the shelter, the medicine. And what's the function of them? It's to ward off the problems of nature. It's all those insects and beating sun and biting cold. And that's what that is necessary. You have a body. We as humans, we have to have clothing and shelter and medicine and all of these things. And we have to do them in a careful and considered way in order to produce this, to support the holy life. And so when we make these buildings such as this, they are carefully reflected on and considered, and within the realms of our resources. When the garage or the place where they used to park a dump truck, I think, was eventually converted into a sala, I was extremely appreciative of that, because the shoestring resources that we had, that was all we could do. And it's still, to this day, it's the dining hall there, beautifully done. As the resources grow, they're not necessarily, there is a danger in some mature cultures where as the resources grow, they can be misdirected away. The point of them and the support for the spiritual life can be misdirected. And you see that sometimes in highly developed or mature or old Buddhist cultures, also in other religious cultures. It has not happened in this way. All the resources, and they have been rather slender, they have not been opulent, have been so exquisitely, thoughtfully, and wisely used to produce this, I would say, exquisite but modest, as it should be, just the right size, just the right thought in this building structure and this arrangement of the monastery. And of course, all through this, I've been in continuous dialogue with the monks who have built this place and been part of the work crews. And so it's a very beautiful story for me to see this manifested. And also the development and growth. As they built this, they built themselves as well. They built their inner spaces as they built this. And they built aspects of patience. And they built the joy of skills as well. In monastic structures in the West, many of the monks have become skilled carpenters, planners, designers, arrangers, all of these things, because necessity. And it's just a part of Buddhism arriving in a new culture, and we can see that even in the time of the suttas. Moggallana, Venerable Moggallana, and so forth, was assigned to be the supervisor of the building of stupas and various elaborate buildings, and he was expected to do it competently and well, and to keep a sharp eye on the contractors and how much they charge for everything and so forth. And this is the job of the exalted Arahant disciple of the Buddha. So it's not, spiritual practice is not divorced from the practical world and the necessity for expressing this inner practice in an outward way, in a beautiful but appropriate outward way. So it's to find all those things, and and you find that in members of the community, a full dimension and expression of various talents, skills, and abilities to do these things. It's quite a lovely experience, even aside from the monastic aspect, of course, which is the whole meaning behind it. It is just the cooperation and the sharing of intelligence, skills, talents, and abilities is always quite a treat for me. So what we have in the expression of this, the cloister as well, I watch this eagerly. I always pester Ajahn Pasanno, have you got up the pictures of the landscaping yet? And so I'm always asking him. I actually have a very great interest because this is not just ideals. It has to be brought into existence. And this bringing into existence involves a lot of sweat and planning and meeting and patience and creativity and forgiveness sometimes as well. And so when I see how the concrete got poured and so forth, and how the LED lights keep you from backing over the curb, I appreciate the details. And it's not divorced. This practical world is not divorced from this spiritual aspiration either. So this is these buildings and the teachings that will be here are combined inseparably and intertwined, and so that I hope, like from talks like this, that you also learn to love and appreciate, project love and into this building and to the Sangha and community here. And this building is something like a violin, although it could have been a burnt violin last year. Our violin almost got burnt last year. We were all at an abbots meeting in New Hampshire, and we got Ajahn Pasanno got an email. He wandered out from the back, said, "Somebody in Thailand says my monastery's on fire." And that's odd, because you'd think that the people at my monastery would have noticed that. But there's nothing sharper than the Thais for being on top of things. And it turned out they were right. And this community was fleeing in the night up possibly dead-end roads in a very dramatic way, and there was difficulties in communicating. But we, as a community, we got, what could we do? We're in New Hampshire. And it was very beautiful what we do. I know, we'll chant. And if you've been a monk for a while, you know that's very, very effective. And so we chanted, and we chanted, and we chanted. And the firefighters say it was very odd what happened at the ridge there. It stopped. So maybe we did our part, our personal fire extinguishers are iti piso. That's the chant on the side of the fire extinguisher. Iti piso bhagava arahan samma sambuddho. And of course, the whole teaching of the Buddha is often referred to as an extinguisher of the fires, the flames of passion, and the eye is on fire, the ear is on fire, etc. The fire sermon. So it is very, we're highly realistic and tuned in. The next abbots meeting was just at Birken just a few weeks ago, and we sat down to our abbots meeting. How do abbots meet? We sit down and then somebody says something. And so what I said was, Ajahn Pasanno, what if the place had burned down? And he didn't even, it wasn't a split second. We'd start again. 46 years? Yeah. It's a long time. Start again. My contribution to that was, if it does, I have room for 10. I'll take 10 of you. So it is playful, it is light, it is serious, and yet it is not serious. And this is what the Dhamma does for you. In a world that can really feel tragic, at the same time, the Dhamma is there to lighten your heart and allow you to accept that after a 20-year building project, it can all go up in smoke. And it's okay. Start again. And I'll take 10. So, we bring a light heart to it and inexhaustible energy. And the energy is only inexhaustible if you do not overstrain it. And there is a way not to overstrain it, and that is every day. You have to undo the excess tension. And that is what our practice is. Our meditation, our recollections, that we're in the midst of the inevitable. At some point in time, this monastery will not be here, and we're okay with that. But the vision that allows you to be in a world where everything comes and goes, that will be there. That will always be available. That is the Dhamma, timeless. It's akaliko. It's available. So, but when you do come here, this is kind of like a violin. And I, as I say, I was a classical musician, and so one of the things I overheard one time was about the Stradivarius violin, this famous violin, which is said to be so exquisite and beautiful. And it said that Stradivarius got the wood out of a cathedral that had been there for 300 years that had burned. The wood was still good in the pillars, and the pillars had, and of course what had happened there for 300 years, people had been chanting and praying, and the very wood had been saturated with that vibration. I think the very atoms, the very molecules love had become molecular. And then, with great love and skill, Stradivarius had turned those into violins and put his special recipe of finish on it, which apparently is part of why it sounds so good. And then, for the next 300 years, the greatest musicians in the world had played those violins with love and then passed them on to the next generation. And this is a molecular experience. And I really think that the atmosphere, the attitudes, the feeling can permeate the very dimensions of matter. And so I'm not sure my theory will be approved by the Stanford Physics Department, but I'm sticking with it. And if it doesn't, when you radiate appreciation, loving kindness, and all of those things, when you do come to the monastery, maybe they will transform it, but it will transform you. Your little molecules have become imbued with love and appreciation and all of those things that are the only point of being alive. The material element is not the point. If you don't have the cultivation of the emotions, the sublime emotions, the beauty of the possibility of peace and love, you have missed the point of the journey. And so every opportunity, whether it's an inanimate object, whether it's a stone that you love, a tree that you love, a person that you love, an idea that you love, these are all abundant opportunities. Don't wait for them to do it to you. You do it to them. You radiate it out of you towards them. And however out of sync you are with the view of the world and the separation of the physical world from the emotional world, etc., it's a badly told story. Most of modernity is just a badly told story, inappropriate for humans. And so find the skillful story, the one that's appropriate for humans. And you will find it in the Dhamma. And how will you know it? You will feel it. And you won't have to ask. Louis Armstrong was once asked, "What is jazz?" He said, "If you have to ask, I can't tell you." What is love? What is peace? If you're asking, you haven't felt it. So keep practicing until you don't have to ask anymore. What is love? What is peace? And then you will have the answer. And practice it wherever you can, however you can, using the material background of the world, using the human background of the world, using the words, the sounds, the smells, all of this. And we're about to indulge in this as well in the next moment. One of the most beautiful aspects is this sharing of food, which is coming up. And I was sitting down talking to one of the other monks below here, and I was looking up at this flower area, and I was hearing laughter and enjoyment. The people who were arranging the flowers were just really having a delightful time. It's a realm for them, and they were bringing these representations of beauty and also impermanence to this place. And they had a special sink, designated a special area for that. And I was just enjoying their happiness as we sat under there. Whether they knew it or not, they were actually delivering some very beautiful vibes to the monks. As we wished, and the kind of reciprocal thing, every now and then they'll notice the monks are down there. Oh, sorry, Ajahn, I'm about that laughter and everything. Oh, please keep laughing. So this is this bringing together of this beauty, the appreciation of the aesthetics, the sharing of food, the sharing of Dhamma, the sharing of goodwill, and the sharing of long, enduring patience to actually make this manifest in the world. And so I'm extremely happy to be here. I was very eager for the invitation to come down here. I told Ajahn Pasanno, I want to see it when it's finished. I want to see it. And I make sure you invite me down for that. And he did. So I leave this today for your reflection. And I spoke for 46 minutes just as a tribute to your abbotship.